Idea.
Dave Haley is the property manager for Lennox Island, and his community is disappearing before his very eyes.
You know, a lot of people want to turn a blind eye to it, but look, it's happening.
Rising seas, storm surges, and erosion, all the hallmarks of a changing climate, are eating away at the coasts of the island he calls home. Dave's house is just 6 meters from the Atlantic Ocean, and he's losing a meter of his backyard every year. In just 6 or 7 years, his house could be in the sea. And his isn't the only house at risk. The entire island is eroding at an alarming rate, twice as fast as Prince Edward Island.
It's great to say we have land elsewhere. Who's to say that that land is safe?
On average, Lennox Island is just 4 meters above sea level. In a single generation, it's already lost 200 acres of land. Meanwhile, the storms over the Atlantic Ocean are getting more extreme, battering the island's crumbling sandstone coast and causing storm surges that threaten to swallow up the houses along its shores. In 2010, an especially ruthless storm brought the water dangerously close to Dave Haley's front door.
I think basically start getting nervous when the water level reached the top of the banking. And that banking was just going. And you could see it, the trees were falling, like, you know, everything was just moving. And then come out on the step and looked over, there's a cottage over across from here, and the water was actually up to its front door. If the water had started going up the road, then we would have been an island unto ourselves here. And yet, this house is higher than most houses here, because it's built up on a little hill. So if we're threatened, what are the rest of them? They'll be dog paddle.
Another bad storm could devastate Lennox Island even further, but the community is determined to adapt, and Adam Fennick is doing what he can to help. Adam is the director of the Climate Research Lab at the University of Prince Edward Island. For years, he's been working with the Lennox Island First Nation to map out their future under climate change. Adam, welcome to the program.
It's a pleasure to be here, Brent.
Dave Haley says his backyard is losing about a meter a year, based on the latest international predictions for sea level rise. How much of Lennox Island will be left in 50 years?
50 years? Well, it's really hard to tell because, the science seems to be changing all the time. A lot of the most recent science is telling us it could rise as much as 3 meters during that time. So probably in about 50 years, with a 3-meter increase, we'd probably lose about half the island underwater completely.
It's not only the coastline that's threatened by all of this, it's also the infrastructure, including the island's only bridge to Prince Edward Island. Here's the chief of Lennox Island First Nation, Matilda Rem-Jatton, telling us about a storm surge that flooded the bridge in 2010.
That night I was at a wedding. Somebody came in and said, the bridge is being washed out on Lennox Island. You can't get on or off. And I thought, oh my God. So that's how easy it is to go to that next level, of fear. With nature working against us, sometimes it makes us realize our fragility of life, and the fragility of our island.
Adam Fennick, if another storm like the one Matilda is describing were to hit Lennox Island, what would happen to that bridge?
Well, the bridge is quite secure because it's made out of concrete and all other hard things, but it does get toppled during these storms, and so they have to close it down. So if ever there's some other emergency that's occurring on Lennox Island, they cannot get the emergency vehicles there. So that's the real risk right now.
The causeway isn't the only piece of infrastructure that is at risk, though. Chief Matilda Rem-Jatton is also concerned about the community sewage treatment facility, and she took us there last month.
So this is my lagoon. And as you can see, it's built up, but you can see the water right there. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, what would happen if it did get breached? We don't want all this flowing over into our water supply. If this gets breached, we're all out of luck. We'll be done. I would truck water in to live here, because this is our home.
That's Chief Ramjat, and Adam, she says that a surge would probably contaminate the water supply. How serious do you think the risk is to the sewage facility?
It's probably the most vulnerable piece of infrastructure on Lennox Island at the moment. The coastline comes right up to the sewage treatment facility. It's really too darn close to the shoreline. So storm surge could wash out some of that waste into Malpak Bay, which is, really world famous for its wonderful seafood, especially its oysters.
Right, so that's a threat to the bay, but what about the water supply of the people who live on the island?
Yeah, a lot of the water supply for the island comes from groundwater, and if you do get the storm surge, it can seep into the well water, and you'd have to truck in water, like Chief Matilda suggests.
So what is the community doing right now, though, to address the risks, short-term and long-term?
On the short term, they've been doing some incredible studies, and they're putting together an emergency management plan so that they know what to do when the storm surges are coming.
But there's also a sense of inevitability here, that there is going to be at some point an inundation. And there's archaeological evidence that this island has been inhabited for thousands of years, well before settlement. How much of the community's history do you think stands to be lost, if it hasn't been lost already?
Well, a lot of it does, because about 2 acres per year are lost through coastal erosion to the sea, and that's about 1 hectare, and that's a lot of your homeland disappearing. And you're right, they do have archaeological ruins there, they have ancient burial grounds. The island itself is an area where they do collection of stones as well as feathers and particular wood that they use in their ceremony. So a lot of their cultural heritage is at risk of disappearing.
We spoke with Gilbert Sark, who is a local elder from Lennox Island, and here he is at the local cultural center telling us about some of the artifacts and ancestral burial sites that have been washed away.
It's part of our history that's gone. When they wash away, that it washes a lot of stuff away. There's a wealth of knowledge that's gone. Not only that, it's someone's loved one that's gone. Someone's family member that's, their remains are now scattered. It's gone.
Adam, you've been working with Lennox Island for years now. What goes through your mind when you hear Gilbert Sark describe all the things the community has already lost?
Well, yeah, I express great sorrow. I mean, we've certainly witnessed these storm surge events every year. We get forecasts for storm surge that will impact on Lennox Island. I've been there in the community when they've received their storm surge forecast, and there's a certain level of panic that comes over everybody because they're not sure how serious that storm surge is going to be. And unfortunately, like Gilbert says, they don't know how much of their heritage is going to be a loss.
I want you to hear one more clip from Gilbert Sark. This is what he had to say about the next generation of Lennox Islanders.
One of the questions is, where do you see Lennox Island 25 to 50 years from now? Answer from one little kid was a bridge going nowhere, meaning, our Lennox Island bridge, and there's no Lennox Island. So if that's coming from a little kid, then I guess I gotta start looking into something. Kind of gets me anxious, I guess, because I don't know what it's going to do and how bad it's going to get.
So Adam, ultimately, will people continue to be able to live on Lennox Island?
My belief in 50 years, they probably won't. I mean, there would be the possibility for it, but, if you're having to constantly move homes or build armoring to protect the shoreline, it's probably just going to be a bit too expensive. I know the band has been looking at purchasing land on the mainland of Prince Edward Island because the population of Lennox Island continues to grow. The future just doesn't look that good for the island itself. It can still remain there, but they might be this bridge to nowhere.
And what will the relationship be with what is left of the island in the future?
That probably depends on the community itself. They can still return to the island to capture their ceremonial feathers and shells. But in terms of living a safe existence there, that is yet to be seen. I mean, this is where people have been going for thousands of years. The community itself has been there over 100 years. People have been born and lived and died on that island, and to not have that as your ancestral home anymore must be quite heartbreaking.
Adam Fennick, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Brian.
Adam Fennick is the director of the Climate Research Lab at the University of Prince Edward Island. We also heard from Lennox Island residents Gilbert Sark, Chief Matilda Ramjatan, and Dave Haley. In Chapter 2 of today's program, we're zeroing in on Canada's biggest city, Toronto,